Cool. All right. So for the recording, Brett's motioned to approve the minutes from the 23rd of October. Do I have a seconder? Anybody?
Sorry, I'll second that. Sorry, I was going to find my unmute button.
It's all right. Thanks, Josh. Okay. So minutes approved. Do we have anybody abstaining?
Can I abstain, Marika?
Thanks, Marika.
And Bharti also abstain.
Thanks, Barty.
Yeah, I'll abstain as well. Joan, I wasn't here at the last one.
On
Paul.
Paul.
I
Okay.
know.
Thank you. Anybody against? Oh, okay. How many do we have? Sorry. So we have 13. We've got 3 abstain. So 10-4. Thank you. All right, we will get back to the agenda. All right, so updates. Ballot status. Brett, I assume
we're going along. Yeah, that's the status. The co-chairs have just finished triaging all the issues we have, so we have everything now scheduled to work on. There's some upcoming block votes, which we'll talk about shortly, but so we should be able to cover everything. At the moment, that should all hopefully be covered off in November. We have a few jam-packed meetings to do, there's no more new things coming in, so we should hopefully be through this shortly.
Great. Okay, the Sparks event.
This was my note. There was just it's notable. We've got a meeting on the 20th, which is our next meeting. It does overlap with a Sparked event, in-person event on the 20th. So I just wanted to note that I don't think I particularly want to change that meeting or lose it at this point, just to keep things moving along. But it was just if anyone was involved with that Sparked event and had a problem, to let us know. So I was just kind of getting an indication, probably, if there's anyone on the call that this would be an issue.
Anyone on the call planning on attending that event?
That makes it easier.
No?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
If there's no major problems, I think we'll just go ahead as planned. Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Okay, ballot reconciliation then.
I'm going to keep talking. So we've got 2 block votes that have completed 3 and 4. So maybe we can
bring the first one.
Jane. Yeah. So they've been approved. So that was covering off that one. It's a bunch of editorial things. And that was all approved. So if people are happy with that, we just accept that result. and also block 4 similarly. That's been covered off as well. So that was a bunch of things related to medications, list profiling that were raised as well. So I would probably just, as a matter of ticking it off, just move that we accept these block votes and 3 and 4. We'll talk about that one next.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah. So I just have a motion to accept block votes 3 and 4.
3 and 4. Okay. I get emotional.
I'll motion. Any seconders?
That's right.
This is Shirley. I'm happy to second.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Shirley.
Do you want me to run a poll, Jane?
Maybe,
It's
if
just,
that's easier.
yeah, it might be easier just to keep the
Cool.
numbers. It's run. There you go.
All right, so we've got 100% plus.
Oh no, can we 4, 6?
Oh.
Yeah. 9 out of 12.
Can everyone see the poll? So we've got 2 that haven't voted.
Oh, one of them's me.
Awesome. Now we have 11. Okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
Good
I'm
press.
a +1 on the affirmative because I can't vote.
Yeah, same. So
You're the chair. You can't vote.
I can't vote at all. All right.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's that? 9 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstains. Chair. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
And
All right.
more
So
block votes.
block vote 5.
Yeah, 5 and 6 are gonna open today, so I'll open them straight away from these meetings. From this meeting, so these have been set up and triaged to be brought through as a block vote. There's this is a bit of there's a variable lot for this one. So yeah, if you do have anything to refer to Telecom, please let us know in the vote and we'll deal with that. Block 5 is varied in nature. And we might look at the other one, Jane. Split them. Block vote 6 is mainly diagnostic report and diagnostic observation related things. So if you have a particular interest, please have a look at those. But other than that, I think they're going to open today and close on the 15th of November. So that gives us a week and a bit.
Great. Okay, so that's the block votes. All right, and then there were.
Brett?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a query. If something's triaged for future use and gets in the block vote, that means it'll get bumped into the next round of issues, or looked at a future date.
It continues. Yeah, it continues to exist as being just deferred, and so it'll come back again to be considered. I think there's a few there that I don't think we have necessarily the project or the personnel in the FHIR Work Group to proceed very much. So I think we can maybe bring them back to have a further discussion on the plan around some of those things, but I don't think we can resolve them right now is the short answer.
Not like the panel of observations is a big meaty thing, and it's going to the whole community sort of stuff. So it'd be good to get it looked at in maybe R2 if whoever's looking at that when they're talking about R2?
Yeah, I think that's a good. It's a good question because I think like in some ways it probably needs like a proper work group or a committee that's looking at like reporting in general. So yeah, we don't really have that group at this stage. So I think it's a little tough. I wouldn't be. Yeah, I don't think it's really a good idea for the FHIR Work Group to make that call as to how it should be without having enough kind of stakeholder input. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
You're on. We're singing in the same choir book or whatever.
Yeah,
Singing in unison. Yep.
That's good. Cool.
Okay, so shall we move on to?
Yeah. I can frame this one, but maybe just open that first to get. We visited this one. This is the third meeting we've visited this one. So so hopefully we can put it to rest. So this is the service. At the moment we have I'm going to go through it again. The Base Diagnostic Request profile, which is particularly aimed at diagnostic requests, and this ticket is raising a proposal to deprecate that specific diagnostic request profile, and since there is now a e-requesting FHIR AG to look after it, and create a general purpose service request profile, and there is a triage position there from the co-chairs that rolls up the things that would be in that profile.
There's nothing from the requesting project that's derived from this one, is there?
Not at this stage, however.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. Actually, yes, at this stage there is some. Yeah, they are deriving from the Base Diagnostic Request currently.
Right.
So that would need so I think we note that in the triage. So that the requesting would need to consider this change as well. But they already have their own diagnostic request profile as well. So yeah.
So it wouldn't be it'd just be a change, but it's they could bypass this one and make the various changes so the net sum gain is 0, but there is a change of what the profile is derived from. So what things are derived from.
Yeah, I think so. So I guess it's this is the disposition that was come up with. So there's some specific bindings there for a new profile, just an AU Base Service Request profile, and the idea would be that the current AU Base Diagnostic Request is marked deprecated in the publication. Yeah. So I guess it's I don't know, maybe some of the requesting people could weigh in if they're happy or unhappy.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any difference, to be honest. And as you point out, I think it just gives the diagnostic request foundation to e-requesting, and then one at Base will continue to be a broad foundation, which I don't think there's anything controversial or diagnostic specific that needs to come through it.
Yeah, so I think from our last discussion, I think everyone was happy mostly with the proposed answer, except for the binding to service request code, which might still not be, that might be too specific anyway still. So that was, I think, where we got to last time. So the question is whether we need to alter that that binding, or leave it unbound, or because the procedure value set only covers certain things, and I'm not sure it's covering all the things that were mentioned if we were talking about other services. I think we had examples like lawn mowing and other kind of requestable services. Yeah.
Do you have a suggestion, Brett?
No. I think this, because this ends up kind of, I think the idea was that now this is just like a procedure request, which is broader and covers the diagnostics, but it's still maybe not broad enough at this point. So I'm not sure we have a target terminology. So an option is just to leave that code unbound, which is not a lot of guidance.
It's already bound by service request, though. Can we just carry through that?
That's just an example, I think.
So coming up with a better binding could be something we do in the next release of AU Base. We're not going to get it for this version. So we could just do nothing and have it acknowledge that having something better, a preferred binding, would be something to do in version 2.
Yeah. I mean,
so in a sense, we're not, we basically say, we'd like something here, we haven't got anything yet, we haven't got any time, we won't do it, and we just, in a sense, create a backlog issue to say, it would be nice to find some terminology for this.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's definitely a thing we could do. And Andy's pointed out, there's an example binding, which is pretty much the same as this value set in terms of its content. In fact, I think it might be exactly the same definition. It's just this one's hosted in CTS and managed there. So, I think the thing would be to try and maybe...
Hang on, you're talking about service request codes binding, aren't you?
Yeah.
So in AU Base, that's got an example to evaluation procedure, which is a health terminology value set, I think.
Yeah. So the proposal was to move to this.
While the example binding is to a SNOMED procedure codes.
Yeah. The one in this disposition, which is the procedure 1 NCTS value set, is very similar to in fact, it's the Australianised version of the example binding in service request resource, I believe. So
in a sense, we're saying that, the core, and don't you hate different things? So the FHIR specification says, for example, use the children of, for example, use the procedure code value set. And then the AU Base at the moment says, we'd prefer to use the Australian version of that.
Yeah, and it moves the binding strength up to preferred as well.
Preferred, yeah.
So I think whilst I think this position makes sense, I'm not sure it's actually achieving, I think, the goal of making it truly general purpose. So yeah. I've got alternate ideas. So we could just leave it unsaid, which means we essentially inherit that example binding from international, which means nothing really. We could create an additional binding, leave it unbound itself, but put an additional binding on that says for procedures, we prefer this binding, which I think is true. So, but that's kind of then just making it context specific to when you want to request procedures. And that would encapsulate basically all of the evaluation procedure diagnostics as well, because the procedure that's in the hierarchy. Yeah, so I guess that's an approach where we kind of just say, yeah, if you're requesting procedures, we have this value set that's useful, and we don't say anything about anything else at this point.
Sure. I think I was looking at something. We're looking at service request, right? So AU Base service request, its binding is example binding, isn't it?
That's a good question.
I got myself confused between service request and yeah. So service request, if we open it up, its binding is just an example binding.
The current diagnostic one, yeah. So, thanks, Tom. Yep, it is just example.
So it's an example binding to a value set, which is a bit narrow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess that's another option. Just make it an example binding.
Well, but the thing is, it already is an example binding, isn't it? This is AU Base service request. This is AU Base
diagnostic request. Yeah. So that's down the hierarchy. So the procedure value set is broader than that one. All right.
Lovely example.
So many options. Does anyone have a good suggestion? Because like we could just do an example binding to procedure value set as stated in the disposition. That's another option as well, which means there's no actual preference stated, and we can work on it.
I've managed to get myself confused. So we've got an AU Base diagnostic request, and the proposal is that we don't want to have an AU Base diagnostic request. We want to have an AU Base service request.
Yeah. So we deprecate this one. Yeah.
And the AU Base service request will be more relaxed, and it will be for any service request, not just for a diagnostic request.
Yep.
And the things that it will offer, it will offer a body. It will mention a body structure. It will talk about AU local identifiers. It will talk about, what else will it do? It will, what will it do once we've made it this more relaxed thing? What will it offer us?
Mainly those identifiers.
It will mention AU Base specimen. Yeah, so if we work through what we've currently got in our AU Base diagnostic request. So if you display that. Okay, so the thing is, what do we want to keep from this if we make it the more relaxed general one?
That's true.
Body structure. Body structure seems to be a thing to mention, but it's not super important because it is just saying, hey, look, here's a thing you could use.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree that that's worth mentioning.
Local order identifier. Yep, that's a thing to mention. Again, we're not here. Yeah, we're mentioning useful things. Code. At the moment, we don't have anything useful to say at code. We're saying so. Let's skip over that one. Requester. This doesn't say anything useful about requester. There's nothing, or is there? Oh, I think the requester. The description. The description is a useful description. It's an Australianised description without there being any Australianised constraints. By saying, e.g., National Bowel Cancer Screening Program. I presume that's something that we've done, because that's come up in the differential table. The performer type.
Oh, actually, there is a restriction. There is a restriction on requester. They've taken out device.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we want to keep that?
And related person. I don't think we should restrict that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
can
No.
drop the, so we'd want to drop the requester constraints,
Yeah.
but we might want to keep the requester text by mentioning it,
Oh, yeah,
mentioning the National Bowel Cancer Screening Program. So I don't know if that's worth doing, but we're sort of relaxing things there.
I don't know if we need to do that.
I mean,
I guess
it's looking
the words
like,
are important. Yeah.
yeah. I think I'd like to have a proposal. I mean, yeah, before voting, I'd like to have a proposal which goes through and say, hey, let's have these things in it.
Yeah. So some of that's in the disposition, but I think not covering some of these things as well. So maybe I can go and update that disposition to get it crafted properly. Get it up.
I mean, there's terminology. It introduces terminology on performer type, reason code, and body site. And in specimen, it refers to a thing. So we're doing definite work on those ones. Requester, it's probably doing stuff we don't want.
Cool. Do you want me to take over for a second, Jane, and we'll craft it on screen? Yeah?
Yep, that's fine.
Oh, hang on. I can allow multiple presenters. Oh, amazing.
Ooh,
Let's try that. Let's try that.
that can work.
Hopefully, can you see? Oh, shit. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, so this is the disposition currently. So, so I think, yeah, that's a good point, Richard. So if I talk about extensions, we'll include the
Target body structure.
Target body structure. Structure extension. As per. I'll just leave that. Yeah, so identifiers I think are staying the same.
Yep.
There's a new inclusion of AU local or identifier on the requisition element, which has nothing on it currently.
Yep.
Yeah. Code, we have to decide what to do. I'm going to put requester in and say we're going to leave this unconstrained. Is that okay, or do people want the words from the other?
What's requestion?
Requester. I have a question that I like asking about it. The so I'll just put just to make that clear. Unless people really want those words.
No.
Yeah, cool. Performer type. I think that's the same.
When you're saying unconstrained, you're not saying you're enforcing it to be unconstrained.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
Remove constraint
from R4. Ooh. Yeah. I'm just going to say unconstrained from R4. Pieces. Performer type. Is there any change on that one?
So performer type's going to relax from practitioner role to a different thing, which is the participant role. So that's relaxing.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, at the moment, it says a thing called practitioner role, which I presume is going to be tighter than a value set called participant role.
Oh, yeah, okay. Is that a good idea?
Well, I mean, given that does the performer have to be a practitioner?
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, participant role, I thought I was looking at that one. So that one is, so that at the moment, practitioner role, let me get up.
Well, okay, this
Actually,
lets you say that the performer is a sibling.
Actually, yeah, this actually might need work because this is not the Australian value set, and we have perhaps our own content. So let me just get, this is the current binding, which is everything from healthcare professional. Yeah, that's in the diagnostic request binding now, which is restricted, and the international binding is this one. So it is like international performer type is bound to this one, which is person, healthcare professional, and healthcare related organisation, which I think is more like what we want. However, I'm not sure we've got an NCTS equivalent. So maybe it's better to not do that.
So if we
work on that.
don't have a good value set, but we have a value set which has some values we like, maybe we just make it example. So we change the example binding to a different example binding, but it's not yet good enough to say preferred because it includes things we don't want.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that until we had a definite destination. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Right. Reason code, I think, is remaining the same.
Don't you hate the way when you go follow the link, it takes you to a not very useful page?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's getting fixed. Yeah, that's getting fixed.
This year?
Allegedly.
Allegedly this year, okay.
Yeah. There's a plan for that. You can pick up the link and then paste it in your browser, the one you see on screen. So like if you go, you can open it. That's what you get as a reference to the stage. So that's actually, that's going to work now. Don't worry, you're getting it direct. Yeah, so it's kind of a working value set there for this stuff. Yeah, reason code, I think, is pretty well established. We use it in other reasons for other resources as well. And yeah, and body site 2 is like a common one that's used. That's not actually the binding. I'll fix that because that's not right. It's actually this one. Yeah. So that would be preferred. It's not letting me paste. It's not helping. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think, okay, so I think, yeah, these all kind of make sense. I think these are established sets and are the same as what was in the original profile. So I guess we've dealt with that one. So for code, do you think it'd be just okay then maybe leave this as procedure, which makes it broader, but make it example instead, example blinding? And then we can talk to the terminologists about a set that's suitable. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, as long as it's not binding downstream users of it, I have no issues.
Yeah, it's not at this point. So yeah, I think it would be good, like if you were to pick it up for your requesting, we would have to really consider that by if we were to go to preferred or something, make sure we're covering that ground, because obviously what you've got bound in the downstream use is, you know, a valid case because you're actually doing it. Yeah, so I think it would be more that we'd probably come up with either a ref set or a value set that included this plus whatever else we needed to define, which I think we need the terminologists to look at, maybe broadening that. We probably have a specific value set for this purpose almost, which would kind of pick up all the things we want to have. Yeah. Anyway, so I think
I mean, for that, we may want specific value sets, in particular downstream ones, without having a lot of value in trying to come up with something that's broad enough to cover every sort of service request.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or we could just pick up all the cases as kind of additional bindings and just go, yeah, for diagnostics, it's this, or even what they've got in here requesting for pathology. They've already got additional bindings for pathology, or actually specific bindings now. But yeah. But we can work on that. This is at least not causing a problem, and it's compatible. All right. So having said all that, I'm going to propose this is not deferred. I don't think I need to say that. As I've already said it, I want to deprecate it up here. So I guess I would move that we accept creating a new profile AU Base service request with this structure and deprecating AU Base Diagnostic Request as stated in the disposition.
At some stage, we'll have to play with the descriptions and so on. I don't know if that needs to be part of. I don't want to wordsmith the wording for the rest of it as part of this exercise, but it will need slightly different descriptions and so on.
Actually, this is a very good question, because the profile doesn't exist, and and whether it's better to do a two-step process and go, we'll draft one, because the effect would be for this publication, AU Base Diagnostic Request gets marked deprecated, and this profile doesn't exist. Is an option, because I think it is a bit rough to just publish a whole new thing, and not have anyone have looked at it as part of a ballot reconciliation. Yeah.
The usage notes might be interesting for something of such general use.
So maybe make this the ticket. So we will say the action would be to deprecate, and then they can see that is true. Okay, and propose adding a new draft profile, and we can just take it through to get it accepted eventually. So we'll just do like a a draft profile to go in the CI build. And then, look at getting that into the next publication.
What's the
It creates problems for e-requesting though, right? Because you wouldn't have that in a published version of AU Base, so you're kind of left on diagnostic service request until later.
how does deprecation manifest?
We, at the moment, our approach is we mark the thing deprecated. It continues to be published until the work group decides it should no longer be published because it's now obsolete.
And how does it get marked?
There is a flag.
Status?
Yeah.
There's a flag in the structure?
Yeah, and that appears in the publication. Yeah.
I'm asking for a friend because I need to do that internally.
Yeah. I'm not sure what it is, but there is one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, okay, so this is the other action, which is, I guess this is a disposition, so and a new draft profile. So the outcome would be we don't get this new profile in the 422 publication. The new profile will just appear in the CI build for looking at publishing next time. I think that's it's a bit, I find it, I'm pretty uncomfortable in just publishing a whole new thing without, I think the original was maybe we would change the other one to be broader, which is still a bit dodgy, but less dodgy.
Are there any people that for whom it's worth trying to rush through this? I mean, I don't, it would, I guess it, are there groups for whom not having this is going to be enough of a problem that we should try and do the work to rush it through? Or is it in fact fine to take the cautious path and simply put this on CI build?
It'll be requesting. Yeah, be requesting. I think that is the main user at the moment. But they would have to have something to pick up to consider probably as well.
Right. So we've got e-requesting people here at the moment. For them, their options would be to continue to use the deprecated one, or to just go to FHIR, the FHIR spec, and just ignore, which is probably what we'd be recommending to them, is to just ignore the deprecated one, build it from the base spec using the stuff that's there available in the CI build one.
Yeah, it's almost there anyway because of the because of the obligations they have on the elements. So
we're using the diagnostic request base in production now, so we wouldn't change that until the service request profile gets published. But there's no rush for it because there's no significant change.
Yeah, we wouldn't hopefully break anything by doing this. But yeah, I think
that's nice because it means that where we might have had a reason to rush something, we don't. So we can actually take the time to do it.
And potentially
gently.
Yeah, if we really wanted to get it in sooner rather than later, there's the potential of running another ballot cycle for AU Base in February. So it potentially could come in then, but we would have to go through the motions of getting that done, and deciding if we are going to ballot in February. That was another question because that's another thing. Right, so I'm going to just move we accept this disposition to deprecate AU Base Diagnostic Request and I'll add a new draft profile. Should I raise a ticket? Do you think I should raise a specific ticket for that? Or just take it as an action?
Action.
Yeah, it's an action. Let's just make it a reconciliation action. Yeah, cool. So 2 actions: deprecate AU Base Diagnostic Request, and action drafting of a new profile. as stated in the disposition. I move so.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Can we run a poll, Jane?
Yep.
Do it. Here we go. Go backwards. All right. Poll is up. Okay. 8 out of 12. Okay, got 10 out of 12. Any last takers? Oh, good. 11 out of 12. Perfect. So I'm a +1 on the affirmative as well.
Okay, great.
Put on that. Good, thank you. That one is done.
Cool.
Sorry, guys, can I just get the stats on how many?
Oh, yeah,
affirmative?
sorry.
Sorry, I think it was
So
12.
12,
affirmative.
12. Yeah, 12 affirmative, 0 and 0.
Ah,
Okay. Do we better take the screen back?
Yeah, I'll stop for a sec. So I've got
Another service request one.
Yeah, so I think this one was a ticket on the requester. We kind of didn't understand, Andy, but we guessed.
Trying to remember.
Yeah, you mentioned healthcare service and we couldn't work out. We didn't think, yeah. Service request does not support target. Yeah, suggested. Yeah, that's, yeah, but that was on requester. What did we think it was requester? That wasn't anything we had any constraints on. But I think performer has healthcare service.
I'm presuming I was saying the references in diagnostic request weren't bound to AU Base profiles.
Yeah, I think this is one of those, and I think this is one of those things I think we need a broader discussion on, but we do have, this is like, that is a use case specific thing, right? And normally with there's two reasons we refer to AU Base profiles from other AU Base profiles, and one is we consider what we're referring to part of the thing, so we use that for things like dosage and specimen. And the only other reason we would do that is if we have a use case specific profile where we want to make it a whole Australian use case, which we try and avoid doing in AU Base entirely. But I think that this is a reasonable question for the diagnostic request profile. But since we've deprecated that now, the question is, does this still hold for the new draft general purpose service request profile? Probably is the question. Yeah, we couldn't work out which healthcare service we were talking about.
We're actually doing healthcare services for hospitals.
Is that the performer?
Requester.
Oh.
I think that was
Is that
is that
a
allowed?
later R version? No, it's not in the list. Hang on, let me check out.
So is this about healthcare service or about service requests reference to healthcare service, or?
It's only performer, which is where we landed.
Yeah, so the base spec does not allow a service to be a requester.
Yeah.
So if you want that,
Maybe
that's why we've
maybe I was meaning performer.
Yeah, that's what we guessed.
Yes.
But we chose not to answer that question. But I think what we've done with the new service request profiles is oh no, we don't talk about performer at all anywhere, do we? So it's allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So ignore that bit.
Yeah. All right. So I guess the question is, how do we dispose of this ticket? We ask Andy to kindly withdraw it. Yeah.
I'm happy to withdraw it.
Oh, thank you.
Can you drop the link into chat?
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's just you that's voted on it. I hope. Oh, I voted on it. Is that because you couldn't vote? I'll have to withdraw it. That's fine. I can withdraw it. Yeah, it's. Oh no, wrong. I'm looking at the wrong ticket. Don't worry. No, it is voted on by Andy. So Andy has to.
Just Andy. Yeah.
The negative. Yeah. All right. Cool. That's good to withdraw it. I don't have to write a disposition.
Right.
Cool.
That one's done.
That one's done.
Right.
Now we're on
Next.
to coverage things. So, okay. So I think this has been discussed in your requesting group, but yeah, this was another ticket for the base profile. And so at the moment we have a very empty AU base coverage profile. In fact, might be worth. Just check what's in it. Yeah. So basically there is a coverage type value, which is pretty important for e-requesting to help with billing kind of activity, and there's no real clear guidance for Australian usage of that. And whilst the binding for the coverage type in the resource itself is a preferred binding, so coverage type is bound with a preferred binding to value set called coverage type and self-pay codes, which has recently had some additions that make it cover some of the ground, mainly the concession payment term now. So we have all of the terms we've kind of considered so far to be useful, so we don't really need to change the binding or the value set as such, I believe, in AU Base especially. So it would mainly be just about adding some guidance as to how to interpret different codes that are in that value set for different Australian concepts. So there was the proposal to add a set of guidance items in the profile specific guidance in AU Base coverage profile, and it covers off these things. So it's covering Medicare, DVA, private health insurance, work cover, motor accident, private self-funded, concession coverages of various kinds. And so there were some words there and which codes to use for each of those cases. So I guess it's whether that is making sense, and probably the requesting people. I think there was some comments on this ticket, which were looked at as well. And yeah, so just, so at this point, whether this is adequate and correct in terms of the code selection and the descriptions.
And some of this stuff should rather than may. I mean, I'm wondering whether this is getting to the area of how to appropriately interpret codes, and perhaps the mays are too gentle here. It also seems to be very much a terminology sort of question. And
Yeah.
do we have terminology appropriate ways of doing this, perhaps in the longer term? I mean, there is a way of just putting this as part of the usage details in the particular resource, but is this a terminology sort of issue that wants a terminology-based guidance somehow? And are there tools to do that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I guess like that, we did think in theory there's some ability to add localized descriptions to value sets. However, we would need to define our own value sets and add that content. So it creates a piece of work that we didn't know we were ready to do yet.
And perhaps
yeah.
produces a product that wouldn't be used by many people. And in fact, the more useful thing may indeed just be a piece of narrative in the profile.
Yeah, so this is really just saying how to interpret those codes in Australian context, which is kind of almost, it does kind of work the other way, like you're saying, which is if you want to represent Medicare, you should use this code. That's true, but I think I think we'd have to think about how to express that.
Yeah. Well, that should can wind up being a couple of ways. One, if you want to represent Medicare from this value set, then this is the code to use, then you should use this code. And the other one is if you want to represent Medicare and you've got any value set in the world to choose from, then you should choose this code. And they're two different sorts of shoulds.
I think as well, leaving it like this in AU Base, I believe in e-requesting there'll be a specific set of codes which are needing to be implemented. So in fact, it will have some more conformance language in terms of the strength of the binding and also some indication on the conformance requirements around the use of those terms. So I think that's where it gets stronger and more specific as well, because I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in that value set which would be very unlikely to be used in Australian context at all. And I think e-requesting is probably going to cover off the main need. Yeah.
How about something along the line of when populating the type from the whatever value set, Medicare coverage should be represented by. So that you've now given the context down to where describing how best to use this value set rather than describing suggested codes. Or is that not what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
The problem for re-requesting is that the code set that's in use is very American in its nature, and so we've made some interpretations from an e-requesting perspective, but those interpretations I think go far beyond e-requesting, because if you are using coverage for any other purpose apart from e-requesting, we want people to use the same thing. So, Medicare coverage with public policy, I guess it is, should be consistent across many things. So I too would think it, I mean, it's obviously a terminology issue, but I'd rather see it as at least a should. I do wonder what else you would do. Like if you were trying to cover Medicare, and then you would choose to use some other code set representation. I don't think we want to encourage that.
Yeah. So if I was to change the language, so I do something like when populating the type using the preferred value set, Medicare coverage should be represented. Is that just sufficient?
That's what I was suggesting. I'm not sure how it plays out for people's perceptions. So, and then and all the maybes wind up becoming should be's.
Yeah. So if I was to,
does that?
You want
how does that play for you,
letters,
Andy?
Capital letters should to make it really conformance language.
Does it sort of not offer anything at all? Does it, or is it helpful or problematic? Or you're on mute.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, it may be. It's just having a common foundation, a common reference, which would be that coverage specification and binding. And I think making it a should would be much more useful than a may.
The other thing is that sort of fits with what you're talking about is we're wanting to make these claims not just in the context of coverage. We're wanting to make these assertions about the value set, even when the value set is used in other resources. And you were sort of suggesting that perhaps this value set is values from this value set are used in other resources.
No. I think I'm just talking about coverage, but I'm saying that coverage is not just for e-requesting.
Oh, right.
Is,
yeah. So coverage could be, yeah.
There's a whole bunch of other uses that we do, and we're repeating this kind of constraint over and over again because it seems weird you'd have a different way of representing Medicare for coverage.
Yeah. You might just state coverage just by itself, right? And just say there's coverage. I think that makes sense.
So maybe Medicare is not a thing you'd want to mention in coverage. You'd want to say it somewhere else.
No, I think you would mention it in coverage because it's just that. I think though you could just have a coverage entry in your system for a patient, and that's just stating they have Medicare coverage with the details.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what's the problem, Andy?
No, I don't think so. Tony, if you go refresh, I've updated the words in the ticket and for the disposition. Hopefully,
Sure.
There you
go. You've got a typo. I don't think that shoiled is a word, but
where is that?
DVA coverage shoiled be represented.
Oh yeah, that's authentic. That's a different kind of conformance.
I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Yeah, I fixed it. Trust me, I fixed it. Yeah. So I guess my question is, does it need any extra things? Is there anything that should be in this list? And is this adequate for now?
It'll do for now. I mean, eventually I think we should be doing our own value set.
Yeah. I think that's probably a thing to think about, to actually get very explicit and go, in Australian context, this is our preferred value set and our preferred interpretation. And like there is we'll talk to the terminology people, but I believe if you can do localized descriptions, which kind of is what we want to do. So in our context, we want to say, yeah, this one is used for Medicare, and we can be more explicit. in the actual terms.
Yep. And maybe we can do, you could then go with an additional binding back to the original for anything that was obviously outside of it and is
Yeah.
not described.
You get, yeah. I mean, it is that. I mean, it is in the resource coverage resource type. It is the preferred binding, so you can't really change that, right? That it says that value set is the preferred value set.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you can't really alter that. But if we're using a subset of that with our own descriptions, we'd be using the preferred one anyway. Cool. So I would move we accept these words to be added to the
I'm happy to second it.
Thanks, Andy.
Awesome. Do you want to poll?
I'll poll. We can find the button. Okay. Relaunch. Here we go. And coming up. Uh, 10 of 13. Give me a countdown.
10,
Oh, that's too long.
5,
3,
4,
3,
2, 2. There's 2 that haven't. One more. One.
All right, I'm gonna end it.
Okay.
So final count is 12 affirmative with me, 0 negative, 0 abstain.
Awesome. All right. I think there's another coverage one, isn't there?
Yeah, that's a good one. And the coverage one. Okay, so this was raised. At the moment, we don't have any in our current coverage profile. We have. There's a link to our current one. So at the moment, we have Medicare number for our coverage identifier, which is essentially just how to identify, a logic business identifier for the coverage whatever type. We've got listed in our identifier profiles of interest, Medicare number, DVA number, and insurance number, insurance member number, which is private health, and the proposal was to add some of the other, which is the 3 concession card numbers, which, just as at the moment you could happily use them with the current profile, but these would be, I think, reasonable things to have in a coverage statement. So I guess the question is, does anyone see any problem with having these listed as kind of reasonable options for the identifier?
I don't have an issue.
That's good. So I will move that we accept adding these 3 profiles to the target profiles of coverage identifier.
Second.
Okay.
Cool. That's good. Cool. Poll. Okay, coming up. Just got 10 out of 13. 11.
Yep. Done.
Cool. I'm gonna end that poll, and we've got actually with me 12 affirmative, no negatives, and 1 abstention. Yeah. Cool. That's a quick one.
Good. All
Um,
right.
I'm glad I added this one to the list. Cool.
Okay.
So copy to extension. So we have an FMM0 draft 0 FMM0 artifact called copy to, which until yesterday I didn't know anyone was actually using in anger. So the disposition is showing that we thought we should just remove it because it's draft 0 and no one is using it, but apparently that is not true. So I guess, yeah, so maybe we'll ignore this disposition, but that's one of the options. One of the options is to remove it. It's now gone because it was never a FMM1 artifact, so has no status. So in the actual minutes, in the agenda item, I put a proposal, so noting the users of this currently, both of which, Angus has gone, has he? One of which is on the call.
I think we're using it too. Right?
There you go. So the question is, do we want to promote it to FMM1 because it's obviously fit for use because people are using it, with some words about its use, or do we want to kind of, because I think there was an indication that it could get replaced by communication request in terms of how it might be done. So therefore the need for the extension would go away. So I have two things there, like adding some words to the definition, which is use of extension might be replaced by the use of one of the more comprehensive communication request resource type, because communication request does a lot more things in this extension, but can certainly take the place of it. So just to qualify that, but that's assuming we're going to retain it in some way. And so the options then probably are either to promote it to FMM1, which means it'll get published in the 422 publication, or retain it still at FMM0 into the future, which means it'll only be in the CI build, but still be there as a thing to reference. So the question is, like, if we do publish it, will that cause troubles down the track? Because it may be that systems move away from that use and we will need to deprecate it. But yeah, so I think the question is, like, if there is a real plan to go away from that use, whether we should actually publish it at all in a working standard spec or not. So that's probably the question, and the requesting people are probably the ones that need to deal with the fallout the most.
So this would be almost like publishing it as deprecated.
Sort of, but the problem I think with deprecating it is we would need an alternative to be available at that point, and at the moment we haven't agreed to an alternative, so we're kind of a bit stuck because there is use of it, so it is currently used. It has previously been published. If we I think it will go through. If we did accept it and leave it in there and get it published, I think it would pretty soon go to deprecated, but I think that's okay. It's just we haven't figured out how to appropriately use communication request to replace this as yet, and it won't happen.
It might be published in the next release of AU Base and deprecated in the subsequent one, once we've actually nailed down what the replacement is.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't have published it last time, but we did. we published it at FM 0, and we've had a thought about that policy before, in the past, since then. So I think it would be fair to say we should make it FMM1 and live with it. Yeah.
The problem with making like FFM1 and then deprecating at a later stage?
Yeah, that would be what would happen. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Is that an issue?
Well, it's not my problem in AU Base
more for
because
the
that's
people who
easily
are gonna
done.
use
But
that,
it's yeah, it's more just but I think the people that are kind of using it are all in the requesting group at the moment. So it's,
Yeah, and I think amongst Telstra Health, Magenta, Sonic, Helios, ACL, that we can create a way forward, and we're probably the only ones using it.
We could put a comment in it when it gets bumped to 1 saying, we expect this to be deprecated sometime in the near future. Pay attention to the working groups.
I've got another proposal, is that we hand this over to the requesting group and let them publish it. Because it is just a requesting artifact, right? There's no other purpose.
Yeah, but it would be applicable to other
service requests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How wide is the remit of the requesting working group? Are they just doing path and DI requesting, or are they doing toenail clipping requesting as well and things like that?
In theory, in future, toenail clipping as well, but it's obviously limited at the moment to diagnostic requesting. My only issue with doing that is that we would effectively lose. We wouldn't have any way of referring to it in its existing use.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so I'll take it back. So I think, I would motion we add, actually, the qualifying text that I proposed do you think that's worthwhile or not?
Is that in here?
Oh no, that's back in the agenda, yeah. The disposition was done. So just whether that narrative saying communication request can do this job, which is kind of a flag that we're going to deprecate this one day. But yeah, whether that's worth doing or just leave it empty, leave it as is.
I think if we're putting it in with the anticipation that it's going to disappear soon, it's probably worth warning anybody who's not already part of the group. And a little thing like that will do it. And if we decide we're going to keep it forever, then we can just do one of those third level number changes, which just removes that blurb.
Yeah, I'm happy. I think it's very useful to indicate that this is kind of some guidance that this is likely in future to be deprecated when an appropriate use of communication request has been defined.
So do you want to tweak these words, or do you want to go with these?
How about this extension?
That's
maybe
fine.
Actually scrap what I was saying.
No, that's fine. I'm happy with your words. I'm happy to.
Yeah, so that's like the user might consider the other one, and we might as well as a committee. so it's, that's good.
Is
having said
the
that,
general blurb for this thing of an adequate quality to get to level 1? I mean, does it have a half-cooked introduction? I haven't read it. If it's got a half-cooked introduction, we might want to do
It's not too bad. This extension, I'll read it out there. We can look at it. The extension applies to the service request resources used to indicate an additional recipient to whom a copy of the outcome of the request, the result, should be sent. The service requester will typically receive a result as part of the normal processing from the filler of the request, and this extension is only relevant for any additional result copy recipients indicated on the request. It's actually quite comprehensive for one of our extensions. Yeah, so I think that's pretty fair, and we would just add those extra words to qualify its use. Cool. So having this discussion, I think what I'm proposing is we add that narrative and move this artifact to FMM1 for inclusion in the publication.
I'll second that.
Cool. Right, Paul. Got myself and Richard. And we'll relaunch to do that. Reaching peak votes. 12/13, perfect. All right, I'll end that one. So with me as an affirmative, we've got 12 affirmative, 0 negatives and 1 abstention. Amazing.
Yeah. Right. And we're not going to have time to do the last one, so
Let's not do that. Yeah, that was really good because I kind of swung those extra 2 in on the end in case we got through the others, which we did, which is really good because now we're kind of tracking nicely on our reconciliation.
yeah. All right.
Excellent.
I think we might call it then.
Wow, we're early.
3
Nice
minutes
one.
early.
Well,
right.
Thanks everyone,
Yeah.
and yes, please do vote in the block votes. I will open them very shortly. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks
Jane.
everyone.
Thanks,
All right,
Brett.
bye.
See ya.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.